Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar. So today we're going to be making some posh pyjamas with a fun frilly finish. As it's very dark and wintry and cold out there, I thought it would be nice to make yourself or a friend a pair of pyjama bottoms that will keep you nice and warm, and I thought I would make them a little bit more special by adding some piping to them. So today we're going to be looking at various different dressmaking techniques, but we're also going to be looking at some fun piping techniques, because on these pyjamas I'm going to add some piping to the pockets. For the pyjamas I've actually used a pattern, so I've used a simplicity pattern and it's 8179, but you could take a pair of pyjama bottoms you already have and just draw around them if you wanted to create a pattern. I'm also going to be using this really lovely pink fabric, which is called Day in Paris by Moda, and I'm going to be creating the pyjama bottoms, but for the top I've actually cheated a little bit, and I've bought a top. So I've bought a nice warm long sleeve jersey top, and for that I'm going to create a frill bow that's going to go on the front in a coordinating colour, and that's just going to pull the whole set together so it looks like, you know, one set instead of just a top and a bottom. So that's what we're going to do today, and I hope you're going to learn a lot about some of the Bernina feet. The machine I'm going to be using is the B475, which is a great machine. This is has a stitch width of 5.5mm and is ideal for dressmaking. And yeah, I think we can get started. So I've cut out all my pattern pieces and I've marked all the notches. And now I need to mark the dots, which are going to help me line my pieces up as I construct the garment. Now you can do that by hand with a normal needle and thread, but Bernina produce a foot. You know, they have a foot for everything, and they have a tailor tack foot, which is really useful, especially if you've got a pattern that's got loads of dots you need to mark. On this there aren't that many, but it's still a really good foot to use. So I'm just going to get my foot 7. And you'll notice I've got my nice Bernina accessory case, which is brilliant because it's got all my feet in there, keeps everything nice and neat, and this is also really good if I need to go anywhere or transport all my feet. They're all in one place. But here I've got my tailor tack foot number 7. Now I've used this foot on previous projects, in previous webinars. In fact, it was on the back of the cushion. I don't know if you can see the cushion in the back that I did for my daughter. I did a little frill on the back of that. But for this, I'm going to use it for its original and proper purpose to mark my tailor tacks. Now, with this foot, it's got, if you can see, it's got a large ridge in the middle. And what happens is you use a zigzag stitch and you drop your feed dog so it stitches on the spot, and it just creates a long loop over the guide, which you can then trim, and then that leaves your dot so you know where your markings are. So that's our tailor tack foot, and I'm just going to go over to my machine and set that up. So I've put my tailor tack foot on, I've selected a zigzag, I'm going to drop my feed dog, so I just need to push my feed dog button in on the side so it stays in, and you can tell it they're down because this little icon has gone yellow. And now I want to reduce my foot, reduce my tension, so I can go into my tension icon here, and I'm just going to take that right down because I want it to be nice and loopy, so I've got plenty of thread, so when I pull my pattern pieces apart and trim, I've got plenty of thread there, so I've taken that right down. Now I want to do say 2 or 3 loops, so what I can do is I can go into info and I can set my pattern repeat to 2. So that's now highlighted, and I can tell I've changed it because it's got the yellow box around it. So I think I'm all set up now, and I can just go ahead and do my tailor tacks. Okay, so this is where my dot needs to be. So I'm just going to pop it underneath the foot so I can see it. And I'm just going to hold my threads, just check it's in the right spot. Just going to move it back a little bit. And then I'm just going to stitch down. So it's going to go right the way over and stop automatically. Because I set that pattern repeat, I can just put my foot down, it's going to go over 2 or 3 times and then stop. Then I can lift up, slide everything off the back. I'm going to make sure I pinch it all as I pull it through, and then I can trim. and then just pop them all up. That's it, that's great, and then I can go ahead and do the next one. Then when I start to construct my garment, I'm going to know exactly where everything should go. Slide that off. Great, so I've taken my pattern piece off and I've trimmed all my dots so I know where they are. And now I need to treat the edge of my fabric somehow, because this is a woven fabric, so it is going to fray. So there are a few ways I could do that. If you've got an overlocker, then brilliant, you can overlock the edges of your project, and I've done that with the main body of the pyjamas just for speed. But I wanted to talk to you about a couple of other ways you could do it if you don't have an overlocker. So if you need to neaten the edges on a project, one thing you can do is you could just do a really simple zigzag on the edge of it, which will work really well. It will keep it nice and neat, and that's a nice easy way of doing it. Or another way you can do it is you can use your foot 2A, which is your overlock foot, and most machines come with foot 2A. So you'd use foot 2A in combination with stitch 3, which is your overlock stitch. Now if we have a look at this foot, if we look underneath the back of it, I don't know if Emily if you can zoom in, there's a little pin there. Can we see that? Just by where my finger is. There's a little pin there, and what happens is the stitches form over that pin and it holds the stitches flat. So it holds it flat against the fabric, so it prevents any rolling, because sometimes you find if you stitch along the edge of something it will all roll in. So that's really good, that holds it in place, and then we've got this nice channel underneath for the stitches to flow under. So this foot really is designed for that. Now if I was going to be working on a jersey fabric, I can seam and neaten all in one go, so I only need to do one row of stitching and it will create the seam and neaten the edges. But because I'm working on a woven fabric, which is obviously got, you know, all of the warp and weft and the fibres, I can't seam and neaten in one go, because it might fray and come apart if I did it like that. It just wouldn't be strong enough. But I can neaten with this foot, and that's what I'm going to do. So when I sew with this foot, I need to make sure that the edge of the foot and the pin is right on the edge of the fabric, and then that should keep it all nice and flat as I go along. So I'm selecting stitch 3. This is my very overlock stitch. Now if you're ever not sure which stitch does what on a machine, we've got this great feature on here where I can press my question mark, then tap on it and it will tell me. So this is saying this is a very overlock stitch, and I can overcast medium and firm fabric. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I've put my foot down and I'm lining up the edge with the pin. So all I need to do is sew around the 4 pieces of my my pocket pieces. So on my pyjamas, I'm going to put a little bit of piping along the top of the pocket just to smarten them up a little bit. And for that, I'm going to use my piping foot 38, which is this foot here. But first of all, I just wanted to do a quick run through some of the other feet that are available that you might use for piping. So the most commonly used one, I think, is the zipper foot, foot number 4. So this is your zipper foot, and you can move your needle position right over to the left and stitch down, so you butt the foot up against the piping cord with its casing around and sew down. And most people have a zipper foot, so this is a good choice if you haven't got any of the other feet. Sometimes I find now I can't get quite close enough, it's not quite tight enough. So if that's the case, then I might want to look at using one of the other feet. So that's your zipper foot. The next one that I think is really useful for piping, and this you can use for piping up to 1/4 inch wide, is foot number 12. So this is your bulky overlock foot, and the great thing about this foot is if we look underneath, it has this really nice wide big channel underneath where the cord can fit in, so it goes over smoothly over the cord, And the other great thing about this is because it's got the nice wide 5.5mm opening, you can choose all your different needle positions. So because of that, you can get right up close to the cord. The tunnel holds it into place and you get a nice snug line of stitching with that one. So I quite often use my bulky overlock foot. That's a great choice. Then we have two in the range which are our double cording feet here. So we have 59 and we have 60. So this is for sewing. You can sew 2 rows. So you could sew 2 rows at a time, or you could just sew 1 row and then move over and do another row, or you can just do 1 at a time. So 59 I think is for 4 to 6 mil of a piping cord, so quite a wide cord, and 60 is for 6 to 8 mil. So these are really for quite large home deck projects. You know, it's quite chunky cord you'll be using with either one of those. So that's just a few of the options, but as I say, I'm going to be using today foot 38 because I'm actually going to be using a really fine cord just to go around the edge. So this is quite a nice fine cord, or you could use a perlé, crochet cotton, something like that. So I'm going to pop it inside its casing, wrap it round, and then I'm going to use my foot 38 to sew down to make sure that's nice and tight. Now if we look at the back of this foot, it's only one side makes contact with the feed dogs. It has this ridge, so it's raised. So what I do is I place the cord up against the raised section. That holds it in place and that allows me to get nice and tight along the edge of that cord. But I do need to have, I'm going to sew this onto my pattern piece, so I will have 3 layers of fabric. So that's what we're going to do now. So this is the front of my trousers and this is going to be the edge of the pocket, and I'm just sewing my cord onto it. So what I've done is I've got my cord and it's I've wrapped around, it's 1.5 inches of the blue fabric, and then as you can see I've used my clips to clip it into place. I prefer using these clips to the pins here because I can get right up close and sort of trap it in. I've found it works better. What I've done is I've snipped my fabric as I've gone round just so I can get it to curve round nicely. So now we're all set to sew. I just need to set my machine up. So if you can see the screen here, I've got a straight stitch, just a normal straight stitch number 1. I'm going to move my needle position over just 1 to the right, and I'm going to increase my stitch length. I'm going to take that up to 4. So this is, it's going to take 2 lines of sewing to do this. So first of all I'm going to sew my piping onto the front, and then I'm going to sew the facing on. So for the first row of stitching I can have quite a long stitch length. Then when I sew the facing on, I'm going to take that stitch length down. So I'm all set up and now I'm ready to sew. I've got my piping underneath my foot and the piping is resting against the raised section of the foot, and then because this is all open at the back, there's plenty of room for this to pass underneath. So now I'm just going to very slowly and carefully sew round the edge. Great, so that's one side attached. I'm going to do the same on the other side. So now I'm going to sew the facing onto the top. I've got my cord already inserted in. So what I need to do is I need to set my stitch length to 2.5 now. So on my 475 I can go into my length measurement and then I can press where it's got the measurement here with the yellow box around it, and it will just reset it back to the standard setting, which is what I want. So I want it to be 2.5. So now we're ready to go. I'm just going to position this on the machine. So I'm just going to check that it's in the correct place. So I can't see where my cord is, but because it's butted up against the edge of the foot, it should naturally follow around. So that's the beauty of this foot. It will just keep it all in place as I sew round. So off we go. Okay, so that looks like that's all gone in, and there we are. Doesn't that look smart? I'm really pleased with that. It just adds such a nice little detail to it, and that's just trapped that in perfectly. So I'm going to now go over to my ironing board and press that all in place, and also I'm going to have to just trim some of this and just put a few notches in so it lays nice and flat. So that's what I'm going to do, and then we'll move on to the next stage. I've pressed my facing back and I'm really pleased with that. It's come out really nicely. So just one more quick thing to do with the piping. I'm just going to top stitch along the edge just to hold it all in place, and to do that I'm going to use my foot 20 because this has a nice wide groove underneath, so there's plenty of room for the piping to flow underneath. So I'm going to pop that onto the machine, and I'm going to move my needle position. So what I'm going to do is line up the edge of the piping with the edge of the foot, and then I'm going to move my needle position over, just to see, I think that's perfect. So that's just one position to the left, so it's showing -1 there. And then just with a normal straight stitch length of 2.5, I'm just going to sew around the edge because that will just neaten that up. Make sure my things are out of the way. So the foot, the toe of the foot is acting as a guide and helping me keep it a nice even distance away from the edge. And I've got needle down set, so I should just be able to ease it round. Neatly finish that edge off. So the next stage is just to whiz round the outside of the pocket. So I'm going to sew the front of the pocket to the back. I've changed to foot 1. I'm just using a normal straight stitch, and I'm using the seam allowance markings on my stitch plate as a guide. So I've got 5/8 of an inch, and I'm going to use my quick reverse just to secure at the beginning, and at the same I'm just going to whiz round. So the next stage in the process is to baste or tack down the pocket so it doesn't come loose or get in the way when I sew the front and to the back of the trousers. So I'm going to do that on my machine, and I'm going to use free motion foot 9, so I can just pop that on, and I'm going to lower my feed dogs because I'm using a free motion foot. On my 475, my basting stitch I know is stitch 30, so I can scroll through and select that there. So let's think, I've dropped my feed dogs, I've selected the correct stitch, and now I'm ready to go. So I've changed my thread to red just so I can easily see it to take it out when I've when I get to the end. So Now the thing I really like about the basting on this machine is because it's sort of a manual basting, you can really make the stitches as long as you want. So I'm just going to bring both my threads to the top. So I'm going to go needle down, needle up, raise it up and just pull through. Grab my tweezers, my famous Bernina tweezers, which I love. So I pull that through, lower that down, and then I'm going to do one stitch at a time. So just do one stitch, pull through. So I need to make sure I'm holding all my threads and my fabric, pull through and do one stitch at a time, and then that way I can just choose how long I want my basting to be. So it's just needs to just keep all this together while I sew. Now I'm just going to leave my needle down, use my knee lift, twist round and carry on. So this is just keeping this all in place and out of the way. So you could use this for basting quilts if you wanted to. You know, you can use it for lots of different things. I go down there, twist round. Now when I'm coming to the end, I'm just going to do just a couple a little bit closer. And then that's all held in place, so that's not going to get in the way when I move on to the next stage. Okay, great, so we're really getting somewhere now. Now we're going to sew the front onto the back to make our two legs. So I've just pinned the front to the back, and all I'm going to do is just sew down the outside and then sew down the inside, and I'm going to do that on obviously on both legs. So I've just got a normal straight stitch, and I'm going to start this end and work my way down. So again, I'm just using my 5/8 of an inch seam guideline here, keeping that all nice and lined up, and I'm just going to whiz down. Just going to secure at the ends, and there we go. It always amazes me that no matter what you're making, with your dressmaking, there always seems to be a million stages. Even with a simple pair of pyjama bottoms, we've still got lots of different things to do and lots of great Bernina feet that we can use on it. Just gonna pop a pin in there, keep that from flapping down. So I'm going to repeat on the other leg and do my inside seams, and then we'll come back. I've sewed my inside and my outside seam, so I now have my two tubes, my two legs, and I need to put them together. So I've turned one the right way round and one is the wrong way round, and I'm going to do the trouser magic trick. So this one is going to go inside this one, like this, and I'm just going to match my inside leg seam, and I'm going to pull it through. So now one is inside the other, and that's going to allow me to sew, I don't know if you can see, sew them together. So I'm going to sew my crotch seam together basically. So what I need to do now is I'm going to go and make sure all my notches are matching, pin it all together, and then we'll come back. So normally when I'm sewing a seam, I would sew forwards and then use my quick reverse to go back just to secure my ends. But another option that I have on this machine is I can choose stitch number 5. So stitch number 5 automatically does 5 stitches forward, 5 stitches back, and then you can sew the length of your seam. And then when you get to the end of it, we press quick reverse and it finishes the automatic sequence off. So for this seam, I'm just going to use that just so I can show you how that works. So it's going to go, take my pin out, it should do 5 stitches forwards. So it's going to go 5 forwards, then automatically 5 back, then forwards, and then I can just whiz all the way around my seam. This is just quite nice because it gives you a uniform start and end all over a project if you want to keep things really you know, neat. This is a curved inner seam. It's just going to take a little bit more positioning. Keep going until I'm right at the end. Sorry. And then I press quick reverse. It shows me on the screen that that's what I need to do. And now it should go backwards 5, forwards 5, and then stitches, and then completely stop, and then I can just trim. And that's a really nice firm end to my seam. Great, so that's all the bottom done. So now I'm just going to pull that through, and it should be looking a bit more like a pair of pyjama bottoms. Let's just turn it the right way and have a little look. I love this fabric, it's so pretty. Right, so now we have a fairly big, hopefully all fit, pair of bottoms. So now all I need to do is attach the waistband, which is obviously going to gather it all up and make it look a bit more like a pair of pyjama bottoms that are going to fit me. So that's the next stage, put the waistband on. So this is the waistband, so I just need to sew it together at either end, and I need to leave a gap here because this is where I'm going to feed the elastic through. So I'm just going to join that together. I'm going to use stitch 5 again for that. So once again it's just going to go, so it's nice and firm, so it's going to go 5 forwards, 5 stitches back, then carry on down. And when I get to the end, stop, press quick reverse, backwards, and then I can just trim. And on this side, I can do that again. So 5 forward, 5 back. Keep going down. Now I'm going to stop here because I'm leaving that gap for the casing. Back I go. And for this end little section here, I won't use that. I'll just use stitch 1 because it's not a big enough distance to use stitch 5. I'll just do a little reverse. So I'll just go forward well, it's doing my securing knot anyway because I used my scissors, but I'm going to go forward a stitch, back a stitch, and then go back a little bit and trim. Okay, so that's sewed together at the side. So now I just need to take it over to my ironing board and press it. I need to press it in half, and I also need to press these sections back. So I'm going to do that, and I'll then pin it onto the main body of my trousers, and then we can come back to the machine and sew it on. Okay, so I've pressed my waistband and I've attached it, well, I've pinned it to the top of my trousers, and so now I just need to sew around it. I've taken my table off, so I've got the free arm, so it's just a bit easier because it's a tube to get it to work around. So I'm just going to sew this on, and then once it's sewn on we can insert the elastic. Sorry, that's my iron that keeps beeping. Right. Just do a couple of stitches back. Even though it does do a knot, I still like to do a couple of stitches back just to make sure it's doubly secure. I don't want it to come undone. Okay, so in the casing that I've made, we've got this little slit here, there's a hole, and I'm going to feed my, I think it's 1 inch, maybe, I'll have to check. I've bought some elastic, I think it's about an inch and a half, which I'm going to feed through. So I'm just going to go and get that, and then we'll pop that through. So I've got my elastic, my 1 inch elastic, and I've got my trusty giant safety pin, which is brilliant for this job. So I'm going to feed it all the way through and try and make sure that it doesn't twist. So I'm just going to work this all the way round. In the pattern it did say you could baste down your seams, so to avoid it getting caught, but see, I skipped that stage. Never mind, it's gone through. Pull this back. So what I'm going to do now is I've got to sew these two bits of elastic together. So just going to work that around a little bit more. All a bit bunched up. Okay, so don't think that's got twisted anywhere. So now I need to sew these two bits together like that. Right, so I'm going to sew a square and then probably across in the middle, just to make sure it all doesn't come undone. I don't want my pyjamas pinging apart at any point. So I'm going to go forwards and back. So I'm going to go forwards, stop because I've got my needle down, then just going to twist this round. It's all a bit fiddly, but so then I'm going to go forwards, and then actually for ease I'm going to go back. Oh, it wasn't very straight there, never mind. And then I'm going to go down across. Well, it's not the neatest job, but I think it will mean that my trousers hopefully won't fall down. So we'll now pop that inside and then we can hand sew the hole up. So that's the waistband on. I think they're looking pretty smart. I'm quite pleased with them. So the next stage and the final stage is to put the contrasting cuffs at the bottom, just so it all ties it all together. So I'm just going to do that. So I've got them ready here. I just need to sew down the edges. So I'm just going to sew down the edge, and then I need to press 1/4 inch seam at the top. So that's my next job. Great. So just got my straight stitch set, normal needle down. I'm just going to sew down. That's one leg. Let's do the other leg. I'm going to have to find somewhere smart to go now when I've got my posh pyjamas. Great, so that's those ready. So I'm going to go and press them and pin them onto my trouser legs. Right, so I'm just going to attach the cuff to the bottom of the trousers. So I'm just going to sew around the edge. So we are nearly there. It's getting exciting. Just want to reinforce this little section here, so I'm just going to go backwards, forwards. That was just where the seam was. Great, so that's that attached. So to make the cuff, now I need to turn this inside, turn my trouser leg inside out, and then sew around the edge. And I just want to give it a bit of a press so it's you know, nice and neat. So I'm just going to press it and then I'll finish that final stage off. Right, so I'm just going to sew this down, and I'm just going to use the edge of the foot as a guide. And then that's the final stage of my pyjama bottoms. Well, I've got to sew a bow on, but that's it, pretty much done. And then we can go on to the fun bit, which is looking at ruffles for the top. Okay, so that's the bottoms finished. I'm really pleased with them. I think they look really pretty and quite posh, and they've got very nice big piped pockets, which I'm sure is going to get filled full of junk, but no, I'm really pleased with them. They've come out well, and I think they're going to be nice and comfy. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at making the ruffle for the top. So this is the nice warm top I've bought to go with my pyjama bottoms, nice long sleeve one in this cold weather, and I want to add some detail to it to tie it all together. So I'm going to use some of the ribbon that I used to create the bow on the front of the pyjama bottoms to make a bow, which I'm going to sew on. But to make it a bit more interesting, I thought I'd ruffle my ribbon up so it has a bit of a sort of a crinkly, ruffly look on the top. So to do that, I'm going to use my favourite attachment in the whole world, which is the Ruffler. It looks like a bit of a monster, but it's just such a brilliant accessory. So it has a normal shank attachment, so it just fits on like a normal foot. The only thing you need to worry about is making sure that the fork goes over the needle clamp, so it goes up and down. You can adjust it so you can have 1 stitch per ruffle, 6 stitches per ruffle, or 12 stitches per ruffle. So that's obviously the distance in between each ruffle. So I'm just going to go for 6 for this project. And here, if you can see that, you can also adjust how deep the ruffles are, so how much fabric is pushed in between each ruffle. So I'm going to attach this to the machine, and then I'm going to ruffle or pleat up my ribbon, and then I'm going to fashion it into a bow and sew it on. I'm going to go for I've got a straight stitch set at 2.5. Now I just need to feed it through so it needs to go under this guide. So this is where my handy tweezers come to play, because I need to pull that through. And I've got all my threads to the top. I'm going to put my foot down. Just going to manually just do a couple of stitches, get it going. Right, and now we'll see if we can get it to ruffle. Here we go. So I'm just going to go slow and evenly. And there we are, ruffling away. It's so exciting. You get a nice even pleat, nice and consistent. So this is quite fun if you ever want to make a handy rosette. You can use it for that. This is great. You can ruffle and sew onto a flat piece of fabric. That's nice to do if you're making a frill on a dress or a cushion or a rah-rah skirt. You never know. I just think it's so fun. I've used it a lot on children's dresses. If I want to extend a dress that my daughter's grown out of, I used to just stick a ruffle on the end, and there it was a bit longer. So it's quite a useful accessory to have. I think it's great. And this is just going to jazz up my bought top and make it, you know, look like it matches the bottoms just a little bit more. So I'm going to ruffle this whole piece of ribbon and then stitch it down. But there is also another way you could do this, which is, it's not so much a ruffle, it's more of a gather to give you like a frilly look. And once I finish this, I'll just show you how to do that, because I know not everyone has a ruffler in their life. Great. Okay, so I'm just going to take that off, so it's looking gorgeous, very ruffly. Just as a final little thing, I just wanted to show you a way of ruffling some ribbon or some cord if you don't have a ruffler, a nice easy way. So what I've got is some crochet cord here, wrap it around my fingers a few times and just pull it so I've got a really big knot, and I've got a standard zigzag set. So let's say I wanted to ruffle this piece of blue here. I'm going to put my needle down into my work, but with my foot raised, and then because foot one's got a slit in the side, I can pass it through. So I'm going to have the knot underneath the foot and everything else over the rest of the cord over the top. I'm just going to couch down over this piece of cord for the length of my ribbon. So we're just going to quickly couch down. So if I just hold it up between my fingers, it sort of flows quite nicely and stays. So when I go at the end, I can just go back a little bit, trim, hope it hasn't caught, oh no, it hasn't. And then look, I can just pull that up, you can see that. And because it's got that big knot at the end, it won't come undone. And then I can use that for whatever I wanted. So then I could flatten that out and shape that into a bow and stitch that down. So I could use that as an alternative if I didn't have a ruffler. But I think for today I'm going to use my ruffled version. So I'm just going to shape it into a bow. I'm going to have a play with that, shape it into a bow, and then I'm going to pin it onto my top and stitch it down. I've hand tacked my bow down, my ruffled bow, and now I'm just going to sew it onto the top. Because this is a stretchy top, I'm going to use a zigzag, but I've really narrowed it down so it's only got a tiny little wiggle, and I've set my stitch length at 2, and I'm just going to try and tack this down. Okay, so that's my Posh pyjamas finished. The bottoms are all done. I think they're looking really nice. I'm really pleased how the piping's come out. I think it looks really smart. And I've added my little bow detail onto the top so it all ties up together. So I'm really pleased with them. I think they look really nice. So I need to go away and find somewhere nice to wear them. So thank you very much for watching today's webinar. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if anyone does make the pyjamas, it would be great to see what you make. So yeah, please let us know if you do make them. But thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.